We're going to pick up on where Christina closed there and actually jump into a geothermal panel session now, which I'm really excited about because I think it's one of the aspects of our program this year where it can really expand some of our knowledge bases around certain parts of the energy sector. I'm certainly looking forward to that personally anyway. So joining me on stage to have a conversation around that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Pernilla Wihlborg from Baseload. She's the CEO of Baseload Power and COO of Baseload Capitals. Joining Pernilla is Srimonto Ghosh, who's at Chevron as the General Manager of Emerging New Energies for Chevron. Then we have John Redfern, President and CEO at Eavor Technologies, an investor, advisor and serial entrepreneur. And I know this is a very confusing configuration, but we're going to all work it out together because we're capable of that. I'm going to push this here. There we go. Let's do this. Nothing like a bit of shape-shifting live on stage, right? Perfect. And finally, Anne, thank you for holding off over there. Come on out. Anne, President of GeothermEx, a Schlumberger company and the Global Chair of Women in Geothermal. Can you make them feel welcome? Yeah. Welcome. Now I feel like I'm really far apart from you, so I'm going to join you over here. Why not?
Cozy up.
Cozy up, gang. Why not?
All right.
We're all fast friends. You don't need to go that close. That's okay. You know, take it easy. Take it easy. Creating that heat, right? Geothermal. It's what it's all about. So that was a really great kick-off presentation there. It gives people a little bit of a sense, maybe for those who might not have previously heard all that much about it, with the way Christina set it up. I loved her tagline that she finished on: "The Earth has power. Let's switch it on." I want to touch on. Maybe I'll come, Srimonto, first to you. We've had a whole conversation earlier today about energy security. And I thought it might be useful to join the dots about that topic specifically. Why, when we talk energy security, can we talk about, or should we be talking about geothermal?
Absolutely. Thank you, Holly. And firstly, congratulations on putting on such an amazing show.
Thank you.
A very energizing, inspirational morning. But yeah, look, I mean, we at Chevron, we are very excited about low carbon solutions and new energies. And geothermal as part of it, we are very excited. And really, when we think about energy transition in the future, we have to think about the intersection of energy security, climate impacts, and affordability. And when you think about geothermal, and especially in the new generation, 2.0, as we say, with the new technologies that are coming on, geothermal can provide not only the always-on 24/7 baseload power, but it also has the potential to unleash geothermal, which is ubiquitously available across the world in different degrees of temperature and pressures, et cetera, to be available right heat beneath your feet, right? So by developing it in local areas where the consumers are close and where you can apply it locally, you certainly can create energy security by developing it right where the load is, rather than relying on specific countries or specific supply nodes. You can develop it globally. So that's why we think, when we think geothermal, we're excited about its baseload attributes and the ability of it to also supply and provide energy security.
Pernilla, one of the things that struck me, and it was a comment I wrote down when Christina was talking, was to do with that it's been seen as niche and the technology has limited its potential. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us and maybe why you're excited about how that's changing?
Absolutely. I think, well, first of all, I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions about geothermal, that it is a niche energy source. And historically, that has been the case. I mean, that has been the lowest hanging fruit. So it's going for projects around the Ring of Fire. But with the technology and development and sort of decreasing cost and speed of drilling, and all of those things will actually help to speed up this energy source.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in a comment to me earlier in the week that you feel like the phone's running off the hook at the moment. There's never been the sense of momentum and urgency around this particular topic. You've worked in this sector for 3 decades plus, right?
A little bit more even,
yeah.
Sorry.
So can you talk us through the evolution? Talk to us about this moment that we're at right now. Why is there such an insatiable level of interest at this moment in time?
Definitely. I mean, geothermal got its start in a big way in 1959 in New Zealand and 1960 in the United States. And it went from there at a fairly regular but not astonishing pace, with a lot of the very obvious resources being developed. But the value proposition of geothermal hasn't been well recognized. It's a clean source of energy. In most places, almost all around the world, it doesn't emit CO2, and that is a very key element of this technology. However, Right now, we're at a moment in time when we have an imperative that we have to deal with, a problem that we have to solve very rapidly. And geothermal can provide a counter to the intermittent renewables. In California, there's a mandate for 1 gigawatt of new geothermal just because of grid instability in California and the pulsating demand and supply. And imagine that grid operator trying to figure out at 6 p.m. how to ramp everything back up when the solar goes offline. So we have a role to play. It is varied, very wide, not only power, although that's been the most of GeothermEx's business over the almost 50 years that we've been in business, but there's heating, there's cooling, there's green hydrogen, there's lithium in geothermal brines, there's closed loop solutions that are coming to the fore. So there's something for everyone, depending where you are, and it's a big value product that we have to recognize for what it is. And so I'll leave it there.
I think it's interesting that so many of you have touched on to different degrees how undervalued or underappreciated it's been for such a long period of time.
It's the first time this has been ever discussed here at Energy Disruptors, and we're really glad that you asked us, thank you, to come and talk to you, but it is often wind and solar. I will say the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, said geothermal 4 times on Colbert, so she wins.
Not that you were counting. John, I want to come to you. You know, you're obviously in the front line as an investor and an entrepreneur. We've talked a lot today about capital. We've been talking about macroeconomics, geopolitics, the movement in capital markets. How have you seen, and Christina touched on it, you know, the expected forecast between now and 2026 in terms of the flow of capital into geothermal? What's your experience been being at the front line of that?
Of acquiring capital for
yeah,
geothermal?
and just seeing the level of demand and industry appetite.
It's been a long, hard road. I mean, when we started out, you know, we used to joke that our barrier to entry is everyone thought we were crazy. And it was certainly any time in the past when you said geothermal is the future, they would go, really? And they said, oh no, but actually closed loop geothermal is the future of geothermal. And they go, that guy really is crazy. But things have changed over time. We've had a very lucky run. We started here in Calgary, not because there's a big geothermal industry here, but because there's lots of really suitable skill sets. People who are used to doing SAG-D and multilateral wells and thermodynamics of the subsurface are perfect. So that's why we started here. But when we raised money, one of our mega angels is here in the audience. You know, we had some good angel investment support in Calgary. We had some good government support. But once we went by that stage, we had to go internationally, really, for VC money, for strategic money from people like Chevron or BP or BHP. So it's interesting, but there seems to be a growing appetite for it, even in the current times when VC money itself is a little bit tight. Strategic investors still seem to come into this category. We had a period of about 10 years, I think, up to recently, when there was no venture money whatsoever going into geothermal, and now there's Baseload, ourselves, Fervo, a whole bunch of people, all are, you know, raising a lot of money, and that's got to be recognition that we're addressing something urgent, and especially not just in the power side, as you say, but in the heating side. For us, a place like Europe, the heating market is as big as the electricity market, and with what's happening in Ukraine and elsewhere, all of a sudden, green is great, but green and secure and energy independence is even more important. So a bit of a long answer, but yes, there's been some local challenges, but the money is coming into the industry, and so there's no
smiling.
excuse.
Do you want to jump in?
I was going to say through private equity as well.
Yeah.
There's a big push there, so it's getting help. Let's just say that support on the financial side, and of course with folks like Chevron involved. With Schlumberger New Energy involved, you know, these are big names that attract some funding.
Yeah, but the real crucial difference that has allowed people to raise money from wherever it is right now is before, geothermal just wasn't scalable. Now people have seen a number of different ways it can be made scalable, and that makes all the difference. Because unless you're doing something massive, you're not part of the solution. You're a sideshow. And we have an opportunity here to be the central show, which is exciting.
Yep.
Very exciting. I want to talk a bit about geothermal risk too, because there's certainly a perception in some pockets that it's full of risk. You know, there's an inability, or it's difficult to look at a patch of land and understand the geothermal value that might be sitting within it, and certainly potential seismic risk and things like that. I'd just be eager to get a couple of the panel's views on risk in the context of geothermal. Maybe Srimonto, I'll come to you first.
Sure. Look, Holly, I represent Chevron, a large oil and gas company. We live with risk.
Yep.
We know risk. We create value by understanding and managing risk well. And I think that's why, from a new energies perspective, oil and gas skills and capabilities are very transferable. Not only the technical skills that John mentioned about subsurface and drilling and completions, but also when you think about above ground risk management, below ground risk management, relationships that we have globally with supply chains and with government stakeholders. So while, yes, there is a risk profile, but we understand risk, and I think we can go through the process with the protocols and the process and the systems that we already have in place are very applicable and adaptable to develop and unleash the power of geothermal and in a scalable manner. So we thrive in risk and managing risk.
How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, just adding on to that, if we look at sort of the oil and gas industry in the beginning of the last century, if we would have stopped because of the risk of drilling, then we wouldn't be where we are today, right? But there were reasons for a lot of investment came in, and now we are where we are. And we're standing at the rim of sort of the climate sort of collapsing. So that, if anything, would be a good argument to actually put a more sort of collaborated, proactive approach to, especially, I think, subsurface exploration. I mean, if you look at Iceland as an example, they have some 60% of their energy coming from geothermal, and that's not a coincidence. I mean, back 50 years ago, the government there really decided that they wanted to deploy geothermal, so they went out and invested proactively. And so there are things that we could do here, both involving more of the public sector, collaborating across industries, and really sort of spreading the word so that more companies and players get involved.
And John, you touched on it a little bit already in terms of your comment about the transferability of skills, but you also made mention to me today, or earlier in the week, that places like Canada and Sweden have some distinct advantages from a geothermal standpoint. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Ironically, we had advantages because we had no geothermal industry.
Yeah.
And if you want to be an energy disruptor, it's helpful if you don't have a long history with one sort of technology that wasn't really, as you said, growing very fast.
Right.
Now, Anne was always progressive, but there are other people in the industry who weren't as progressive, or if you've been peddling one solution, it's human nature that you'll want to keep peddling that one solution. So we both, no geothermal in Sweden, no geothermal in Canada, not a single kilowatt, and that was a bit of an advantage, but still the skill set itself.
Right, for the entrepreneurial taking, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. But we're all one happy family now.
Indeed we are.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make a comment about risk. Anything that is worth doing has risk. And through the years, we've found ways to overcome risk. We've had risk mitigation funds to help support the early stages of geothermal projects. We now have risk mitigation in the form of a closed loop solution, which is in itself a risk mitigation. But as I would say, geothermal may not be the big thing in the energy, what I will call the energy transformation. To me, transition is too weak a word. We have to literally transform what we do in energy. So I'd encourage you all to think about that. But if we're going to do that, we have to take some risks. And if it includes risks that are not publicly acceptable, then we have to get ahead of it with public involvement. And that's one of the issues that I think geothermal needs to learn better, and it's my personal crusade to make sure that people understand the value of the immense amount of heat in our Earth. It's so many more times than we need. We just have to get it out, and it's happening.
Yeah, the whole idea of risk, though, it's more than just a risk. It's the fact that traditionally geothermal was slow. You could have risk, and it could be failures, but it could be 5 to 10 years to do your typical geothermal project. And we know with the urgency we're talking about here, whether it's with energy independence or energy transition, it takes 10 years to do a project. That's too long. So it's got to be scalable, but it's got to be scalable in human lifetime too. It's going to make a difference. Yeah.
It's also got to be valued in the right way.
Yeah. Right.
And that is a challenge for us. And the value of geothermal to me is immense. but getting that understood. What do you think, Srimonto?
No, absolutely. And I would just add that when you talk about risk and risk management, what you see on the panel here is this partnership, this kind of collaboration is what we need between, between the large oil and gas company, the technology entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial project developers, and the large sort of service providers. I think when that kind of minds come together, I think the risk can be managed and create tremendous value and really kind of showcase the value of geothermal.
Now, we've used the term a couple of times in this panel conversation. We always like to make sure at Energy Disruptors we never assume knowledge. We make it safe to ask questions and to learn. So closed loop specifically. Who wants to explain what we mean by that when we're talking about geothermal?
Well, there's one obvious person.
Closed loop man.
The interesting thing, we like to say that there's a bigger difference between closed loop and traditional geothermal than there is between traditional geothermal and oil and gas. Oil and gas and traditional geothermal are exploration games. You're looking for a rare constellation of geological occurrences, create a permeable reservoir. For ourselves, we take a lot of the geology out of this by just drilling what's really a massive heat exchanger or radiator miles below the surface. And by massive, I mean massive, 50 kilometers of open well bore, at least one of these things. So it's all about the scale of it. And once you do that, like I say, it can speed things up, it can scale things up because you can do it where you want it, and it changes the whole equation.
And one of the things that struck me when we were talking earlier in the week was you made the comment that there's a level of hype and momentum, but we risk not having enough of an emotional connection. And I wondered if you could unpack what you meant by that.
Yeah, and it was Graham that actually noted this, and Pernilla will remember, it was at a Baseload Capital event, is that geothermal's problem is that you don't have an emotional connection to ordinary people. And I think this is true, but there's an easy way in. Ground source heat pumps, district heating, these are tangible things that mean something to people, much more than power to the grid, which might seem sort of, at a level that they don't really comprehend. So that's an important thing. And I would just encourage everyone to sort of think about what geothermal can do for them. In every place, there's a use that can be had. So it can bring the word geothermal into the dinner table conversation and into the renewable electricity supply conversation as well.
So geothermal has a branding problem, does it?
It does.
It does. And we've been talking about this because if you think about it, if you ask your kids at home, most of them know solar power, they know wind power, but I still haven't heard anybody, not even my own children, before I told them what it was, had heard about geothermal power. So it's really something we need to, as an industry, unite our voice and reach out further and stronger and sort of educate about this incredible power source. And as Anne was saying, it's not only power, it's heat as well. So it's energy, and there's so much that can be done with it, and it's quite cool.
So I get the sense there's an extraordinary, and you jump in, but there's an extraordinary amount of optimism amongst this group of people, not only in the capability, but in the future that's able to be realized. Is that a fair assessment of the group?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's hybrid solutions for geothermal, not only geothermal alone. We can go into deep basins, we can do green hydrogen, we can do lithium extraction, we can do so many things. So it makes a nice bedfellow, I think, with other technologies.
So we need a nice visual for geothermal. And by its nature, it's hidden kilometers below the surface. So I know some of the stuff we've all tried is instead of showing a windmill or a solar farm, we show an empty field and say, that's geothermal. That's it. Because we're actually the absence, which is
it's a harder sales job, isn't it? Or messaging job. Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to flip it and go, if we were to pre-mortem and say that in 5-10 years' time, geothermal had not reached the potential of some of these forecasts and some of your optimism and ambition here, what would you say would be the likely causes of that failure to realize? What are the things that sitting in this room today people need to be following, paying attention to, that are going to be the determining factors on whether we see geothermal play the role that it's capable of playing, I'm hearing from all of you, in the energy transition? What would you nominate as the risks or the challenges that need to be overcome?
I think the biggest challenge is that the externalities, which is a word that hasn't been spoken much at this conference, which surprises me, the externalities associated with the kind of energy we typically produce has not been quantified and put on to the people who produce it. So there's a false economy when people say, geothermal is too expensive. That's total rubbish. It's not too expensive. It's incredibly valuable and incredibly economic. Projects get going and they run for 30, 40, 50 years. They make a lot of money for people. However, the price that's paid is always compared to the price for fossil fuels, particularly oil, gas, and coal. And that is something that I think is a hindrance. I'm not really answering your question, what would be failure? But maybe the failure could be the lack of recognition of what air pollution is doing to people and that is produced from these other sources of energies. And all of us have to answer that question. And then geothermal will have a fair playing field to compete. And all the many still existing natural hydrothermal systems can be developed, as well as EGS, AGS, and everything else. So that recognition to me is the biggest hindrance.
Which I think also speaks to that point that Gillian made this morning in setting up the ESG discussion, where she talked about the limitations of economic models being what's included and how you boundary them, which is really at the heart of externalities, pricing, all of that piece that you're touching on there.
I think it's more than just that. If we can sell the idea of energy autonomy or independence or localization of energy, so you get away from the NIMBY problem, people are developing the heat and the power they need for their local community locally, because it's benign enough, people are willing to pay for that. People are willing to pay for that security. I know they certainly are in Europe, especially when it comes to decarbonizing heating networks, which is a huge market, and they not only want to get off gas, they want to get off Russian gas. And people see the relevance of that now.
Yeah.
And it's an easy calculation to make. Yeah.
Absolutely, and John, agree with that. And I would just add on and come back to the partnership and collaboration that I talked about earlier. I think one of the fundamental success factors which could also become a barrier is the partnerships and collaboration that we need, not only from the industry players like you're seeing here, bringing the synergies of technology, capital, and human ingenuity together, but also the partnerships with the governments and the policymakers and shaping not only the recognition and awareness, but also sort of facilitating an ecosystem where there's sort of equity of the different sort of technologies to be able to participate in the energy system. So I think that's going to be pretty fundamental to make sure we can unleash to the scale. Because we have to de-risk technology of this Geothermal 2.0, as we call it, and scale it up. So there is a journey here. We are confident we can get there. But yeah, it'll take that kind of partnership and collaboration to really unfold.
I mean, I just need to add on to that because I so fully agree with it. If we look at geothermal, it's quite unique in the sense that it's been proven for such a long time.
Yeah.
It's not a new technology, but the problem is it hasn't scaled up. So if you think about it, it's like oil and gas, again, 100 years ago, the sort of the beginning of the journey of the industry. So the reason it hasn't scaled up yet is because we're lacking the collaboration. If we don't manage, then it's because we haven't managed to sort of convey to the industries around to come in and help us, to attract the best talent, to kind of cross over and help us to excel. So there's a lot of specific problems that need to be attended to, but if we get more people, more brains thinking on this, more collaboration, then I'm convinced that we will solve it. So that's sort of at the core of it.
So we're doing a little microcosm now of the branding problem we're trying to solve. We've got a room full of people here, and I said one of the reasons I was excited about this panel is I think it's one that a lot of people will have learned something new in. But that encouragement around starting conversations that you talked about, that need to think about how you make this human and real. I'd love for you to share the stat, the insight, the anecdote about geothermal that just truly astounds you, that is one of the reasons you are so passionate about this as being mission critical, to kind of reference the NASA mission we were talking about earlier to the step ahead. Because what I would love is to empower people to go out and go, did you know? Oh my gosh, I just found out today. And what would be the standout thing about geothermal for you, whether it's a statistic about the future of where we're heading or the capability that exists within our very planet. What is it for you?
Well, I would say geothermal there's something for everyone, everywhere. So that's one thing about it. It's ubiquitous. It's huge in scale. So the other thing that I think we need to talk about, or that we should be proud about, is that there's a long history. It is the old new energy. It's the old renewable. There's a long history of successful production, and that can be expanded upon not only in the conventional space, but in all the other spaces, like closed loop, like EGS, heating and cooling. So we have a bright future, and I think we're going to be part of this transition. Sorry, I used the wrong word, transformation. It rolls off the tongue so easily. But we have to be vocal about it, and we have to be clever about it, and we have to build the vision that people can use the heat of this planet to solve their problems no matter where they are.
I like that piece about ubiquity, though, that in theory this is as accessible a conversation to have with anyone, anywhere in the world, in a way that probably can't be said of a lot of the energy sector necessarily. So that's an interesting point. John?
Well, it's interesting. A couple of points I'd make. One, this room should understand the potential here better than anyone, because what we're doing here is really driven by reductions in drilling costs. Mm-hmm. And everyone here has been through the shale revolution and the transformation that happened where it takes 3 months to do a well in 1 year, and then a few years later it'd be a matter of days. And that's going to happen here as well too. But the thing I like about it is not so much some specifics about the technology itself, but this is a reaction I get to the narrative we're weaving here. I mean, this is the one startup I've done a lot of startups, but it's the one startup that my kids get excited about, and my 88-year-old dad gets excited about. He calls me up with suggestions all the time. But in fact, what really touched me is this last week, I was talking to an investment banker from London, and we do the whole pitch, and at the end, the guy said, "I wish my mother was still alive." And I go like, "What? Well, why is that?" And he said, "Well, she would have really liked this, you know?" And so if it's touching the heart of investment bankers, there's something special going on there.
Oh, that got too loud a laugh from some of you in the room. There we go. Particularly raucous in the front there, so I'm intrigued by what companies represented there. Nice one.
What connects me to geothermal and what my conviction grows every day, Ollie, is that it's on, it's everywhere, and we have the skills and capabilities to really sort of adapt and unleash this potential. If we're not waiting for some miracle, we're not waiting for some sort of magic resources or capabilities, I think we have it from the shale revolution or other sort of areas that we can translate it to. On a personal note, what connected to me was that I was traveling in Iceland with my friends Alex and Matthias early in February, and I saw bread being baked, covered in soil by geothermal heat right there by the road. And that was like, it's on, it's real, and it can be for everybody, everywhere.
Awesome. Pernilla?
I mean, for me, it's just the simple fact that the opportunity is there. I mean, we have enough energy in the Earth's crust or more energy than we could ever dream to consume. And the technology, at least the initial part of the technology, has been proven for such a long time. So we just need to drill into the ground, pump it up, and sort of use the energy. And it's the simplicity of that. It's proven, it's there. We just need to put our minds together to scale it up. So if anything, I would say that excites me. It's not rocket science, contrary to what Christina, my dear colleague, was saying before. I mean, we're not going to the moon. We're just actually trying to solve a problem to something that is, already available to us.
Absolutely. Well, we've been given the challenge. The Earth has power. Let's turn it on. Can you join me in thanking our phenomenal panel, Anne, John, Srimonto, and Pernilla, for a fabulous conversation on geothermal. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone.